chair for a second. I need the chair. I need the chair for a second. Ah, yes. The difficulty with beauty is that you can't function. It totally wipes me out. Going over Mingus Mountain this week, the trees have been so beautiful. And along one curve, there's a tree in stunning yellow. It stands out like the radiance of God, just pulling you off the road, and you have to pull over to the side. I mean, you could cause accidents all over. Today we're talking about God immanent and God transcendent. That sounds very impressive, doesn't it? I had to write something for the lecture. God immanent and transcendent. Whoa, that would get you into divinity school as a thesis, right? I never had time to go to divinity school. Well, at one time I wanted to be a Unity minister, and now I give talks at Unity churches and sermons at Unity Church, so I saved myself all that trouble again. We won't talk about theology today. Except maybe an occasional reference. Those who are interested in theology, you'll find that the Encyclopedia Britannica under theology is stunningly brilliant. Really excellent. If you want a review of theology throughout the ages, the encyclopedia is really quite good. God immanent means the realization of the source of one's own existence, radiating forth as your beingness, traditionally called realization of the self. Realization is sort of the right word, but not actually. What happens is more a recognition. It's more that everything you've seen in a familiar way, now you see it as a radiance of its essence. It's like revealed. It's recognized. You recognize yourself as all that exists, as the essence of all that exists. Although it's a realization, it's really a recognition. It's also a remembrance, because as it shines forth, one wonders how one could have forgotten that. Some terrible insanity must have overtaken you, that you've forgotten who you are. How could that be? It's a wonderment. And that you were okay all along. All the lifetimes that you worried about everything was ridiculous. Your survival is guaranteed, because that which is the essence of life has neither beginning nor ending. Our country is a theocracy. It's not a theocracy, I'm sorry. It's theistic, but not a theocracy. The fact that it's theistic bothers some people. And I suggest they just ignore it and go about their business. Which is what most people do in the course of the day anyway. So you don't have to make a big political opus about it. If you don't like God on your money, you can white it out, I guess. You can use foreign money. You can transfer your money into franc to other things. Traditionally, throughout all of time, man has been theistic. Man has sought the source of his existence, explanation for life, a context in which to place it. So man has struggled throughout all of time, even primitive tribes. Worship maybe the God, they could see God in the bear or in the reindeer. They could see God in nature. But there was always this constant search for God. And as men became more intellectually sophisticated, he attempted to intellectually define it. And thus grew theology and religion. I am chairman of the International God Anti-Defamation League. And one of my projects is to defend the good name of God, who has been besmirched throughout the centuries. He's been maligned as the great perpetrator. It's necessary, therefore, to refer to the map of consciousness so that we can figure out where God must be, you see? As we calibrated the levels of consciousness, we went from the lowest, most destructive, the poisonous reptile, the political militant who blows away thousands of innocent people. We come on up through normal, healthy people, loving people, and we come up to the top. Now it's necessary to remember that God is at the top of the chart and not the bottom. That's all that's required. Doesn't that seem simple? Huh? However, throughout time, there are forces that try to make the map go in the other direction. And we see them in current society. 9/11 was the eruption of God is at this end, folks. And this side, and this end, we're going to have a protest parade to remove God. So the God here is the source of killing all Americans and infidels and God knows what all. They knocked off 3,000. They've only got 300,000 to go. They get busy round the clock. They can't keep up with the birth rate. So I'm going to tell them their project is limited in expectation. However, God has traditionally been depicted in a variety of extremely negative ways. When I say the great perpetrator, that's precisely how God has been maligned. Huh? In July, we went through about 18 statements about the true nature of God, and the entire class we calibrated whether it was true or false. And we got unanimous agreement on the nature of God. In a normal theistic society, then, the authority for government, for rule, for law, for logic, for social mores, for ethics, has been that God is the source of our existence. Without it, in an atheistic society, you have chaotic rule by force. You have the warring tribes. You have the disorganization and chaos of a communist society. What happens when God is not acknowledged as the source of life is you end up with totalitarianism. A fascist dictator will take the place. Then millions of people will gather in the great squares and go Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil, Sieg Heil. And God is then at the bottom of the chart. When God is put at the bottom of the chart, then godly powers are given to the state. No ethics, no basis for human behavior other than force. So the levels below 200 represent force, which as they go down become progressively, frankly, demonic. The levels as they go up become progressively, frankly, more heavenly. We presume that people want to move up the chart to heavenly peace. That's idiotic. Most people do not want peace at all. They would rather be right. They'd rather be right than have peace, you know. Peace is a threat to many people. People say, there's nothing happening around here. We'll turn on M&M. Then something's happening, all right. We'll turn up the boom box in the car and drive down the street. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. Although peace is forever within you, people are afraid of it. They're afraid of being wiped out by the infinite presence. And so the ego keeps up its endless chatter. It like holds off God as best it can. It makes sense to hold off the God of religion. I remember when I became an atheist, it was a great relief, frankly. I was scrupulously religious. It became like a burden. And I think I've told you before, I used to dread Saturday afternoon when you went to confession, and then Sunday morning you went to communion, and you weren't supposed to have a sin on your soul. And the sin was supposed to be like a black spot on your soul. Well, I dreaded that. Can you imagine walking around, God is staring down at this black sin and this black spot on your soul? So, you see, the fear of God then, the fear of God was the fear of punishment. Fear of God as the great punisher, the great avenger of your dastardly wrongs. You got annoyed with your mother, that's enough to, bang. Dear Father, have you sinned? I got angry at my mother. You can say 12 Hail Marys and 13 Our Fathers. You're getting angry at your mother. So God became sort of dreadful, scary. And when I became an atheist, it was a great relief. Therefore, you can see why ungodliness or no godliness, not anti-godliness, but just ignoring God, allows you greater freedom. Because that depiction of God is the great oppressor. People who revolt against God are really not revolting against God, they're revolting of an image of God as the dreadful great oppressor, the ultimate threat. Judgment Day. Oh, sinner, beware. Oh, woe. Judgment Day. Well, how did all that come about, and what is the truth? What is the actual truth? The actual truth is that man tries to develop a conceptual understanding of God, theological truth, as best he can. The instrument that he uses to do that, however, is the intellect. So theology then is using an instrument which calibrates in the 400s, we said. Reason, Intellect, understanding, abstract meaning is the intellect. So you might say theology is the attempt of the intellect to describe and understand that which is incomprehensible. Let's see, theology is in the 400s, resist. 420, 440, 450, 460, 4... Theology generally runs around 460. The theology in the Encyclopedia Britannica calibrates it over 450, 460. It's pretty high. 450, 460 is pretty high understanding. From an intellectual viewpoint. If mankind has been unable to fathom the true nature of God through the intellect, then he's done it through emotion. He's done it through imagination. The primitive tribe watches the volcano erupt and presumes there is a goddess of the volcano. So to make the volcano stop erupting, you sacrifice virgins. In volcanic countries, they run out of virgins after a while. The volcano keeps going, they keep sacrificing virgins. Whoa! They also sacrifice, they rip out the heart of young men on the altar also. So you'll find that the calibration of the Incas and people such as that was not extremely high. We have permission to do the Incas resist. The Incas were over 200 resist. You know, ripping out the hearts of maidens to a demonic god is worshiping God as the demonic. God as the demonic. So the history of religion throughout all cultures has really been emerging from the misconception of God as really the ultimate demonic. The God of the Old Testament is very threatening, very selective, prone to jealousy, having his nose out of joint, getting PO'd at people, having favorites, making promises, contracts, partiality, and exhibiting all the defects of the human ego. So Freud, as we said, attacked that and said that the ancient gods are projections from the unconscious, projections of hatred and fear, primarily hatred and fear of father figures. The bad, wicked, threatening, terrifying father is projected onto God. He then concluded, therefore God did not exist, which was an incorrect non sequitur. He should have said the false gods do not exist, but he did not really address a real God. It was not within his province. As you remember, Freud calibrates at 499, which means he took the intellect as far as it can go. So he's not to be faulted for having failed at that level. His level of evolution was 499, and he made great contributions to the relief of suffering. Many of Freud's teachings, we don't even recognize they're Freud's teachings. They became so accepted that they become part of our culture, part of our psychological understanding. You can't watch the evening news without some concept from psychoanalysis appearing. The killer must have had something go wrong in his childhood. Yeah, he got born, that's what got wrong. He had some pretty bad karma, and came out with a little defective neuronal structure. That's what's wrong. They can't help it because the neuronal structure is faulty. The prefrontal cortex is faulty. Not because bad things happened to them in their childhood. Bad things have happened to everybody in this room. Anybody gone through childhood without anything bad happening to them? Let's see your hands. The embarrassing moments, the chagrin, being falsely accused, being punished for something your sister did and you didn't do. I mean, there's a million things, right? Being ganged up on the way home and given a bloody nose. Endless things happen to people. People, here's the misconception, is that bad things that are happening now are due to bad things that happened to you then. No, bad things happening to you then and now is all for the same reason, because bad things are always happening to you because this karma is still operative. The karma that gave you a lousy childhood is the same karma that pulls the trigger to see what it's like to kill your classmates. It's all the same karma. Therefore, to understand reality, the pathway to enlightenment, to understand God both immanent and transcendent, the one thing we stress at the beginning of every lecture is that the basic defect of the ego is its belief in causality. There's a this causing a that. Instead, we know that all things are appearing to be that which they appear out of the presence of divinity in this instant. It's out of the now. Out of the now that this that you witness is arising. It is not out of the then. All things arise and express themselves as the fulfillment of their karmic potentiality. As it opens thusly, it is not because it's caused by anything anywhere else in time or place. Unless you realize that, you will always presume that there is a me, an ego, that is the cause of what's happening. You will always presume that there's a me causing this decision. There's a me doing that action. You cannot get over identifying your personal self with the ego unless you get beyond causality. Therefore, causality is the biggest basis for the continuance of the belief in the ego as self. Everything is happening spontaneously. There's nothing causing anything else. There is no thinker causing you to think. The thinkingness is happening of its own. Thinkingness has a life of its own. Thinkingness doesn't even give a rap about you. You think your thinkingness is your friend. Let's all do an experiment. Let's all stop thinking when I say stop. When I say stop, I want everybody to command their mind to stop thinking. Stop. Uh-oh. The mind will go right on with its thinkingness. Because its thinkingness is coming from itself. It's not coming from a you. There's not a you that decides that your mind is going to think. It does that all by itself. It doesn't give a rap about you. Well, that's quite a downer, isn't it? Your mind doesn't even care about you. Here you thought your mind was your best friend. It's your mind that's going to get you out of the troubles in the world. Let's see what happens. Here's a thought. Where'd the thought come from? Yeah, I drew where it came from. Where it came from is right here. Nowhere. Came from right here. Nothing. Nothing at all. The thoughts come out of nothingness. In looking for the self within, the presence of God within is that which is a priori to the mind. You have to catch it right before it thinks. Once it thinks, you're looking at the thinking. You have to look and catch what is it that exists right before the mind starts to think. It is continuously present. It's continuously present. But consciousness itself does not think. Consciousness itself is like space. Space is not thinking. Space is not doing anything. But it is out of the potentiality of space that the pageantry of life occurs, allows it to be witnessed. The only reason you can see cat, is because it's coming out of no cat. It's because it's against the background of nothing that you can see it. If it was against the background of something, you can't see cat. The lectures we gave on the structure of the ego were because through certain understandings, the ego begins to collapse. What one is seeking in so-called self-realization is the awareness of one's identity with that which exists prior to thought. I am that which does not think. That which I am doesn't think at all. People say, what are you going to talk about? I haven't the slightest idea until I read the thing. I'll tell you how long I spend thinking about what I'm going to say. 1/10,000th of a second. From here to here is 1/10,000th of a second. 1/10,000th of a second is how long I contemplate what I'm going to say. It happens of its own. Everything happens spontaneously as an expression of its essence. The style of its expression is influenced by karmic propensities. That's why we spent a lecture on karma. Another difficulty with the Western world especially is mankind stumbles along not only with ill conceptions and misconceptions about the nature of divinity and therefore of himself, but he's got karmic bumps and grinds to deal with on top of it. We said last time that the newborns, you can calibrate their level of consciousness the minute they're born. In fact, the soul doesn't enter the embryo till the 3rd month. There's no point mourning a miscarriage in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd month because there's nobody home yet. The builder builds the building. Only at a certain point can you move in. So from that moment on, however, you can calibrate the level of consciousness of the entity, the being, the potential human. How is it that one comes in with a calibrated level of consciousness already when you haven't even had a human life yet to the average understanding? It's because this human life is just a sequence. That which is prior to thinkingness is awareness, consciousness. Out of the unmanifest, infinite potentiality of God arises the manifest. Out of the manifest arises consciousness. Out of consciousness arises life. Therefore, life itself is divinity expressed as beingness, as existence. Life cannot be destroyed or killed. It can only change form. It's like the law of conservation of energy or the law of conservation of matter. The law of the conservation of life is that you can force life to move from this form to that form, but you cannot destroy life. We've said that in many ways, and we've expressed it in funny ways and esoteric ways. We said when you swat a fly, it doesn't notice it. Let's reaffirm. When you swat a fly, it doesn't notice it, resist. Goes right on flying, resist. So I told you. It moves from physicality into its etheric body, goes right on flying. Any of you have been out of body, you realize that. One minute you're laying in the sick bed in the hospital. Next minute you're sitting up in the room and watching everything that's happening. You haven't got a problem in the world. No pain, no nothing, no problem. Don't have to go to the bathroom. All kinds of advantages. No taxes. You don't have to get dressed. Don't have to get up, go to bed. So, the essence of God, then, is the infinite, unlimited context of the entire universe. God is the infinite context. The infinite context, out of which the entire universe arises, is in absolute, perfect, karmic, harmonic balance. The power of God is infinite. Like a giant electromagnetic field, all that exists throughout all of time, anywhere in the universe, which is constantly expanding, is held in place by this enormous electromagnetic field of infinite power. Infinite power. One of the first things that stuns you when you reach a state called self-realization is the power is of such immensity that no human imagination can even get near describing it. Not only is the beauty incapacitating and stunning and overwhelming that you can hardly breathe, but the power is so infinite. The idea that anybody would challenge the power of God is so funny that it's hysterical. It's so pathetic. It's so pathetic. If you've ever gone to a huge power plant, one of the great dams, and watched the great turbines coming out, and watched the electric power pulsing out, it's so incredible. Hundreds of thousands of volts. If you just put a little hair like that, it would fry you. Therefore, those who hate God and oppose God are pathetic and comical. No such thing is even possible. They exist in two different domains. This domain below here is power. Is force, and that above it is power. Huh? Yeah. Now, power is not threatened by force. Power is not threatened by force. Reality is not threatened. That's what shocks people when they say, well, what about, aren't you afraid of war? And I say, war and peace is all the same. It's all the same thing. Hard to understand. Because this is a world of appearance and the manifestation of that which is karmically necessary to evolve spiritually. Therefore, this is a perfect world. There's no point to change one iota of this world. You tell me where else you're going to undo your bad karma. When you think of all the cruelty, you look at the history of mankind. You think of all the cruelty that has accumulated here. You think of the karma of the people that put thousands of people to death in gas chambers and tortured them. The Inquisition, good God. The amount of bad karma that needs to be undone is enormous. Well, where are you going to go and do that? You're not going to do it in heaven, I'll tell you, where you smell flowers and listen and sing songs and have kindergarten parties every day. I don't think so, folks. The Englishes that I've gone through in my life, which have been considerable, probably about as far as you can go, even at times, didn't just come about as an arbitrary, sadistic God. That's what I thought. When I was a teenager or whenever it was, as I said, I was a very religious, highly religious. And one day it came to me as a great vision, a great revelation, like the opposite of what came to me many years later, in which, like, unfolded before me an awareness of the extent and the totality of the suffering of mankind throughout all of time. It was so staggering. It blew me away. I didn't know why I didn't just die at the moment. Incredible, the revelation. Clockwork Orange is a comedy compared to what really goes on in this world. And in that instant, I became an atheist. I couldn't believe any God that could allow that totality of human suffering throughout all of life. And then I became an atheist. It was a great relief. Get rid of that threatening monster in the sky. Didn't have to walk around in fear of sin. Spot on my soul. Didn't have to be scared of Jansen swimming suit billboards. They would give you a wicked thought. I was pure and holy that morning on the way to communion. 29 Model A Ford with the top down. And Jesus, here's this 30-foot long Jansen swimming suit lady there. At age 12, you know what a boy's mind is like. There went a splat on my soul. God in His infinite mercy, Lord. So you can see that the false depictions of God are what accounts for atheism to a great degree. It's just too bloody, too horrible, too dreadful, too threatening, too anxiety-provoking. And all the depictions of God as being at the bottom, which have infiltrated religion over the centuries, accounts for the religious wars, the inquisitions, the exquisite sadism and cruelty that parades under the banner of religion and righteousness, etc. In July, we went through about 18 different statements about the true reality of God and excluded all those errors. Those errors came in through misconceptions. They often came in innocently. However, they also came in by design, The Book of Revelations came into the New Testament by design. Let's see if that's so. It was by design. The attack of the demonic, the lower astral, on that which is holy. If you hated God, where would you go? You wouldn't go to prison. It's already been done there. Already been done there. No, you would attack the citadels of holiness, that which is really a threat to the dominion of that which is ungodly in this plane. Yeah? The ungodly were succeeding, by the way. succeeding. Because when we calibrate the levels of consciousness, we noticed that they stood at 190 throughout all the Middle Ages, throughout all recent history, throughout the last 1,000 years. The consciousness level of all of mankind at the time of the birth of the Buddha was 90. By the time of the birth of Jesus Christ, it was 100. What is that? Fear. Mankind, at the time of the birth of Christ, calibrated at 100. That's all of mankind. Slowly, slowly it crept up. And by the year 1100, 1200, it was 190. By the year 1300, 1400, 1500, by the 1600s and the 1700s and the 1800s and early 1900s, it stayed at 190. Well, during that time, man was evolving, so why wasn't the level of collective consciousness of mankind evolving? Because there's lots that's against it, it's evolving. They have their own TV stations, their own TV channels, in which wickedness, that which denigrates God, and the reverence for that which is sacred and holy, is celebrated. It's celebrated because, they'll tell you why, it's profitable. They'll tell you that. Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, which is how to rob, kill, beat up people, become a criminal, have a prostitute, and then kill her so you can get your money back. Would you believe that? No, that's not the worst of it. That's patently degenerate. That's patently degenerate. And they tell you, it sells. Of course, vice is always sold. That's not exactly news. No, that wasn't what was shocking. What was shocking was Time magazine wrote an essay a couple of weeks ago extolling the virtues of it as creative freedom. See, that which is negative used to be identified as that which is ugly and depraved and corrupt, etc. Now it's disguised. The wolf is in the sheep's clothing. It's called freedom. The degradation of freedom to license, and it's used for reasons of obscenity and depravity and degeneracy. Well, it's freedom of expression. Well, isn't everything? Bin Laden's just expressing his political views. What the hell? If there's no criteria in a non-theistic context, there's no criteria of right and wrong, good or bad, preferable versus non-preferable. There's only what makes money. There's video games that are so beyond the pale that you can't even believe that they're actually sold on the shelves. In fact, some companies, I guess, refuse to sell them. No, that's not what I'm worried about at all. Not that I worry about it. Shooting each other up on the streets, there's nothing to worry about that. Selling dope and killing people and all. That's run-of-the-mill. That's the upper levels of hell. That's games land. No, it gets down more serious when the infection begins to distort the capacity to tell truth from falsehood, the holy from the unholy, and the sacred from the profane. The perversion of the third eye, of spiritual discernment. If you think that which is wicked is good and nothing but freedom and just a game, then you're in worse shape than the killer on the streets. The killer on the streets knows what he's doing when he kills somebody. He's in better shape than the person who does it and thinks that he's just expressing his political freedom. No, it was a sad day when I read that. Just as the New York Times wrote an apology for Eminem. Yeah? Rape your sister, kill your mother, chop your brother to death, and all the vulgarities. So those kinds of things are way in the bottom here. And we don't really worry about them because they're easily recognizable. What is not recognizable is the perversion of logic and truth to subserve. So that is the new sheep. That is the wolf's. That is the new sheep's clothing that hides the wolf. The satanic is easy to see. The satanic is just chopping people up, killing, rape, murder, drugs, suicide, run-of-the-mill, cheap everyday stuff. But that you can say yes or no to. You can say yes or no. It's clear and obvious what it is. No, it's when it subverts the third eye, your spiritual eye, so you cannot tell truth from falsehood anymore. And mankind cannot tell truth from falsehood. Man, that's why the Buddha said there's only one sin, that is of ignorance. Jesus Christ said there's only one sin, that's ignorance. Krishna said there's only one sin, that's ignorance. They also said that if your intention is correct, it doesn't make any difference if you're wrong. Krishna, Jesus, Buddha, they all said, if your intention is reverence for that which you hold to be sacred, then even if you're in error, Krishna says, you will still be my beloved. And Jesus Christ stands for the salvation of those who have fallen by the way out of mistakenness. So man struggled over all those centuries. Why was he so slow? Why did it take you 500 years to get from one place to the next? I mean, science advanced. Other areas of human knowledge advanced. What's the matter with the level of human consciousness? It's stuck at 190 in 1981, 1982, 1983. From the year 1200 all the way up through the late 1980s. In our recent lifetime, it was at 190. What is the world like at 190? 190 is the solar plexus. It's pride. And it's pride. Pride and gain. The world I grew up in, it was the bigger car, the better job, the bigger title. Make a success of yourself. The rule was success. Then in the late 80s, for mysterious reasons, it jumped to 207. The world is now on the road to integrity. And this week's Fortune magazine, the front of it is all about integrity. Integrity in corporate America. Integrity. Can you imagine Fortune magazine having an article on integrity in America on the front cover 10 years ago? What a laugh, you know? Integrity is the new paradigm, and we spoke of that. Okay. So, God first sneaks into human life here on the level of integrity. Courage, the power to admit the truth. That's why it's nobody, that's why a society which excuses all responsibility is non-integrous. It's non-integrous. It's not his fault what happened to him as a kid. That is not integrous. You just sold the kid out. You just sold any hope of salvation out. You just sold him out. Because if you're just at the effect of your past, well, nobody has any responsibility for anything, do they? Everybody has a past. Our society is unsophisticated. They think it's just the past of this lifetime. You should look back and start remembering all the previous lifetimes. This one is nothing at all. This is kindergarten. What you did before, boy, I tell you. Anyway, the excuse of responsibility. Well, we produce this because it sells. We only give the public what they want. It's not his fault. Something happened to him as a kid. Every monster that appears in the media now, instantly an apologist gets up defending his rights and trying to blame it on his childhood. It's amazing. I said, as soon as these two people get through killing 13 people, there'll be a rush to protect their legal rights, right? Didn't I predict that? And that's exactly what happened, right? Yeah. Within a second, everybody wants to get famous by protesting. So you see the reversal. So the modern wolf in sheep's clothing is coated in a intellectualism, in an ideology which is actually sophomoric when you look at it. It doesn't hold up. There's no reality to it. But it is appealing and it tries to gain power. Why does it try to gain power? Because it undermines integrity. It transfers power from the integrous to the non-integrous. That's what the struggle for the dominion over this world is all about. After all these millennia, the time of the dinosaur consciousness of life on this planet was 70. Bin Laden is 90. Hitler is, I don't even mention him. And finally, in the late 1980s, it goes to 207, which is a different density. You see, the buoyancy of life is different. At 207, that which is non-integrous begins to pop up. Heads begin to roll. People resign from the stock market board of directors because integrity is now the criteria. So God sneaks into society then by the focus on integrity. For all the religiosity that went on in prior history, religiosity is not integrity. Religiosity is sometimes just a self-indulgent emotionality. Those who allege that their life is devoted to God then must of necessity become integrous. Integrous means also to stand, the willingness to stand and be counted for the truth. The willingness to stand and say, no more. To not take a stand is to join the oppressor, and you then drop to their level of consciousness. No, we're required at a point in life to say no. So it's integrous to say no. The depictions of God throughout time, then, we see man has really been obsessed with God. Strange gods, weird gods, but some kind of God has existed in every society, what we call primitive or not, and right up to this present day. The definitions of God, then, have come out of the intellect and have also come out of contaminations from the unconscious and have also been attacked. The true descriptions of God have also been attacked by those energies which are really ungodly. Devotion to God means what? It means, to begin with, just a reverence for life. The reverence for life is the awareness and the acknowledgement that the essence and source of all life is divinity. Life is God. God is life. Therefore, life cannot be destroyed any more than God can be destroyed. The proof of the existence of God is your own existence. It's a very advanced understanding, but with a little meditation or contemplation or looking at it, you realize that nothing has within itself the power to create its own existence. All that is would either have to come out of nothing or something. If it's a golf ball, if it's a shirt, if it's a living, breathing human being, doesn't suddenly spontaneously exist out of. The only thing that can come into existence spontaneously is form. It can go from this form to that form, but it cannot choose to create its own existence. No one here has the power to create his own existence, nor do they have the power to extinguish it. Existence as life is not extinguishable. The mystics of the ancient Vedas, the Buddha, all the enlightened masters throughout time have been identical in explaining the exact nature of that presence within. Verbatim. It is so exact that if somebody brings me a book, people send me books by the hundreds. If somebody brings me a book and I look at the book, I can look at the book, I can look at one sentence. That person either knows it or they don't know it. It's unmistakable. It's like an imprimatur. It's like a stamp of validity. The presence within, the knowingness of the being is unmistakable. Why? Because it's absolute. When I said the power of God is so overwhelming when the first witnesses said, and that is the source of its absoluteness, or vice versa. The absoluteness and the infinite power are one and the same. It leaves an unmistakable imprint in the aura of every single person in this room forevermore. That is a fact. That is a fact. Therefore, I am blessed by your presence, that I may share it. The pathway to salvation and the pathway to enlightenment are somewhat different, and yet they're the same. Religion is ordinarily practiced throughout the history of America has been. You're born into a certain religion, you go to church, you do the best you can to adhere to it. You try to undo your sins, you pray, you do the best you can. And you know the prognosis spiritually is very good. That's a fact. To just be an ordinary, God-fearing, religious person and practice your religion to the best of your ability is excellent. Yeah? That's all that's necessary for salvation. It's all that's necessary for salvation. You don't have to become a saint. You don't have to become an enlightened mystic. You don't have to become a Buddha. As long as it doesn't become oppressive. And what happened with me is it became oppressive. And therefore, I shook the whole thing. And when I was an atheist, from the time I rejected God as the source of all evil that I could see, until the moment of that stunning awareness many years later, which was like being in the middle of a lightning storm or something. but at least in the middle there was peace. It's better to have no God than a wicked God. Better to have no God than a wicked God. At least you got some space to breathe and live. Be a human being without constantly being beset with guilt and fear, huh? So the God of guilt and fear, then, is the one that has been the nemesis of man, the nemesis. Those who have experienced the presence of God in its unmistakable absolute certainty, which is infinite and beyond all time, there's no time in which there can be anything different, because that which is the absolute is always and exists now beyond time, therefore is not subject to time or to change or to any modification. As it is now, it has been, always will be, which is just a verbalization. You only have to know it one instant and you know it forever, because that instant is forever, because in that instant you're outside of time and you're into forever. So you witness God forever. Therefore, what is witnessed is unmistakable. Because it's unmistakable, it never varies over the course of time. No mystic ever lied. You pick up the radiance of the truth in that book. No mystic ever lied. A mystic, the idea of a mystic lying is sort of comical. The karma of lying from that level would be so dreadful and to be beyond description. The thing that always surprises me about so-called false gurus is when you think of what the consequences of what you're doing is, it is so staggering that they couldn't understand the nature of God or they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. To understand the nature of God would be to be aware of the absoluteness of the karmic coherence of all of creation. That's why you don't have to worry about Judgment Day, because Judgment Day is every day. Judgment Day is right now. Judgment Day is continuous. Judgment Day, we have permission to ask this in front of this audience. Resist. Judgment Day is this instant, and this instant, and this instant, forever. Judgment Day is therefore the fact that this is a giant electromagnetic field that we call God, the infinite context out of which comes all of creation, and its infinite absolute precision and power, instantly responds to all that is as it comes into expression. We don't have to worry about Judgment Day, because right now is Judgment Day. How you're doing right now is about how you're going to do, right? The infinite potentiality of the soul, then, is the reality out of which our existence arises, out of which the sense of I. And what's surprising is that the presence is more I than what you think of as your I. What you think of as your I is really peripheral to who you are. It's like thinking of your clothes or your body or your car or something. And then suddenly you realize, oh, that's where my I is. It's the source out of which my sense of I. How do you know that you are? Everybody just presumes that. How do you know that you are? The only way you know that you are is by being what you are. If I tell you you are, won't make any sense of that. I'll say to you, hey, you are. You say, what do you mean by that? No, it's not conceptual. When you wake up in the morning, the first awareness is of existence. You don't know existence is what? You don't even know what gender you are. You have no name yet. All there is the beginning coming out of a state into, you're only aware that you are, that's all. Then within a few seconds you become aware that you are in a bed, that there's a body in a bed, then that there's a kitty there, and then there's a room, and then there's an alarm clock, and the body stumbles across there, and now you're aware you have a body. I mean, you see, you begin to come out of an infinite non-linear reality into a progressively linear reality. But as you do, then your definition of yourself starts going farther and farther from the truth. The first awareness that you are, you should have stopped there. You're ahead of the game before you got out of the bed. And once you get out of the bed, it goes downhill from there, folks. The fax machines, the phone calls, oh my God, no end to it. And now we have the curse of the internet on top of that. I mean, it's bad enough before. And now we have another monster in the house. You sneak them over at night and you look at it to see. Aren't you going to look at that now, honey? No, I don't think so. After I get home from work. God knows what's waiting for you on there. The complexity of life so obscures the essential realities that we really need spiritual meetings, commitments, readings, meditation, all to just recall the truth of who we are and what this is all about, and that what we're really responsible for is our intention. What sets karma then is the spiritual will. The spiritual will. A person who sacrifices his life for what he understands to be God, as Krishna says, is in a good place. He may be screwed up, but he will still be beloved by me, because I know he did it for my sake, but didn't know who I was. You know? That's good news, folks. Well, there are teachings that are the opposite. There are teachings that say that unless you use a certain name for God and this, that, and the other, that your butt is in a sling. No, that's not right. I mean, God would have to be stupid, you know what I mean? You know what a kid's intention is. He can make a mistake, you know. I make the coffee a lot of times and it goes all over the floor. I don't know what's the matter with I push all these buttons, I do all the things, and the next thing I know, it's all over the floor. I do the same thing at the girls' ranch. I make the coffee there. Friday, she said, Doc, it's all over the floor. There's a little thing you got to push there. I said, God, jeez. I got home, Susan says, that little doojiggy at the end of the telephone cord that you plug in the thing, she said, it broke. I mean, our life is ruined. Life came to a standstill. You might as well kill yourself. The snap at the end of your telephone broke off. Life is extremely complex, you know, extremely complex. And by the time I leave here, I'll have had it with this plane, I'll tell you. It's gotten so complex, I don't want to do it anymore. I can't even read the instructions on things people give me for Christmas. You pick it out and it's too complex. People lose their sense of self. They lose their identity. They lose the basic essentials of life. And that's why it's important to constantly come back to context, the context of life, and not get lost in the content. We get lost in the content. The overall context is, you know, what your intention really is, what the intention of society really is, what the intention of that group that you vote for or a politician, what is their real intention? To clarify the meaning of your own life, the meaning of life itself, the meaning of human life, to see yourself as part of the evolution of consciousness since the beginning of time, to give yourself some slack, some space in which to grow and make mistakes and realize that you're still at the effect of karma as it expresses itself just in the design of the human brain. You didn't design your own brain. I mean, if you don't believe in karma, well, you'll believe in the fact that you are born with something in the middle of your skull that you didn't design. So you can call it genetics, you can call it inheritance, you can call it whatever. But we already have a load of stuff to deal with the minute we're here. So we should have a certain compassion for ourselves, a certain compassion for other human beings. I'm sure these people these suicide bombers probably believe that they're doing this for God and they're going to go to heaven. They may actually believe it, which is more demented than lying about it even. No. So we develop a certain compassion because we realize the limitation of the human condition. We realize that without divine intervention, our goose is cooked. That's a fact. Without divine intervention, forget it. Is that a fact? We have permission to ask if that's a fact, resist. That is a fact, resist. Whoa, without divine intervention, we're goners. Ooh. That's why the atheist is in sort of a tacky situation. At the weighing of the scales, and he faces Osiris, who's he going to call to speak for him? Anybody? Anybody out there to speak for this soul? The god of the underworld is waiting for you. There's times when you need friends. There's times when it would be good that you were kind to at least one person once. I gave my seat to that pregnant lady in the subway. All right. If there's even a speck of hope, salvation is possible. Whoa, is that right? If there's even a speck of hope, salvation is possible. Resist. Whew, what a relief. So instead of focusing on a negative, punitive God who is irrational, sort of semi-psychotic, paranoid, sensitive, overreactive, partial, extremely neurotic depictions of God, we have an infinite presence which guarantees the absolute justice of all of life throughout all of time. It's the creator and sustainer of life, out of which comes the guarantee that life itself cannot be lost. One cannot lose one's life. One's life, the essence of that which is the self, as it shines forth, is beyond all material, beyond all design, beyond all structure, beyond all bodies, beyond all thoughts. It has no place in time. It has no structure, no form. That which you are is invisible, beyond all form, and indestructible, because only form can be destroyed. If that which you are is beyond all form, then you are indestructible. And one of the coolest things when you get into a really great space is you realize you're invisible. It's really cool when it first hits you. Who you are is totally invisible. Nobody can see it at all. It's hysterical. It's like your little secret. They all think you're this. What a guess. It's like they think you're this, but you're really over here, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, you're safely out of the way. The real you is safely out of the way. If it gets run over by a truck, don't worry about it at all. Let it go over the cliff, and you'll be surprised at the bottom. It's terrific. You've done it before, and as it happens, you recall it from before too. You will recall it. Recall. The memory comes back. Oh yes. You remember going over the cliff in the Andes. You remember each and every one. You remember the circumstances. Some of them were very funny. I've told you some of the funny ones here. I killed him for Jesus, and he killed me for Allah. It was hysterical. We couldn't stop laughing for a couple of centuries or whatever it was. However, we both serve God. We both serve God. And God in His infinite mercy forgives us our ignorance. And therefore we have to learn to love ourselves and to our fellow human beings, despite all our limitations. And we'll take a break. Karen, how about some music while we take a break? I have to learn how to function in that space. It's difficult to function as the awareness progresses. One finally reaches a state of immobilization, and I advise everybody to leave at that point. You can't get a chance to take it. No, there's karmic propensities, momentums that may, after some years, stir you to moving about again and learning how to live in the world. See, the depictions of divinity which are transcendent, which are traditional in religion, are based on causality and picture a linearity. Because it's an expression of the ego as defined through the intellect, it sees things in terms of temporal sequence and causality and therefore of time. The trouble with that is it eliminates God as a reality. God then becomes an historical event that happened to somebody. It's always in some weird place on the planet, and it's always elsewhere in time. God never comes to, somebody going to work on Madison Avenue. It's always in some remote place, barefoot in the sands of some place. That makes it esoteric, and you don't really identify with the reality of it. Elsewhere in time and place, and often in a strange manner, so that humankind doesn't really identify with it. What humankind tends to deify is history, historical events, which are somewhat interesting, but not really. Not really, because they become a block to the awareness that the presence of God is at this very instant. The presence of God is in alwaysness, It's not a now, it's not a then, nor is it in the future. The displacement of God to elsewhere in time and place is what the downside of religion. Came in, rolled the dice, now on Judgment Day, That removes God as the current reality and source of one's existence. The recognition of the presence of God is a radiance that arises out of the awareness of right this instant. 1/10,000th of a second. In 1/10,000th of a second, one comes out of this and realizes the alwaysness of that which always is. The mystics then emphasizes the realization of the presence of God now, at this instant, as the ongoingness out of which your own existence arises. There's no point in worshiping history and places. People, they walked here, they walked there. The people where these people walked and talked right now calibrate about 1:30. It's unlikely to get to heaven in the Holy Lands. So, that which was once sacrosanct has not been corrupted. No. God is found in the sacredness, the respect for the sacredness of all of life and all that exists in this instant. People say, well, what about the wicked? They're the perfect expression of wickedness. Why would you want to change them? They're exactly what they are. Ugly, horrible. They're the perfect expression of wickedness, so that you can see what it is, and you have a choice. The great benefit, the great value of this life, then, is that every instant, within an infinite complexity of choices, a million and millions of choices are constantly present, scintillating, shifting from moment to moment, so that we trace our own karmic path. We imprint upon our own spirit the record of all that has befallen us and what our response has been. So, the value of this life is that instant to instant, we constantly choose and thereby determine our own future. It's not up to some arbitrary judge elsewhere. Not up to some arbitrary judge elsewhere. That which I'm envisioning is of the underworld. Osiris is of the underworld, not of heaven. Oh. We have lots of wonderful questions. I wish I'd read the section on theology in the Encyclopedia Britannica. I mean, we've got some busters here, I'll tell you. Some of these would stagger. And I thank you for them. The complexity of the human mind is staggering, And it all the thinkingness is arising out of, it's a matter of focus. Instead of focusing into the whatness of life, it's focusing into the source of the awareness of that life. How does one come into conscious awareness? The source of that conscious awareness is the self, with a capital S, which is not different than God. God is everywhere at all times, therefore present within you. The idea of a transcendent God is elsewhere. Elsewhere. You have to seek God elsewhere, or hope for him after death. That makes God inaccessible and really a non-reality. It makes God a belief system. It makes God a dogma. First of all these religions give a name to God and then become proprietary. That which has no name, they put a name on and then kill anybody that doesn't go with that name. I mean, that's really such, so far from where it's at, That which is innately present to all that exists, the very source and essence of life itself, is nameless, invisible, has no form, parts, has no motivations, has no axes to grind, has no purposes. The karmic unity of all of existence, as I said, is like an infinitely powerful field which recognizes and records everything. Everything has an automatic consequence, not an arbitrary one, not a moralistic, judgmental one. It's automatic. Every thought, then, is like a minute particle, 10 to the minus 400 millionth of a watt. It's like a tiny particle that has a charge and a configuration. So if everything that ever existed radiates out at every instant an energy, and this energy has a polarity, it either gravitates to the top of the chart or the bottom of the chart. It has a charge. Some charges are stronger than other charges. You can say that's not fair. But that's the charge in your head, you know. No, everything is innately and absolutely fair. Why? Because everything can only be that which it is. You can't be that which you are not. Consequently, if you can only be that which you are, then what occurs as a consequence of that is absolute perfection. That which is charged this way gravitates this way, and that which is charged this way gravitates this way. Automatically, as the nature of the expression of that which it is. What could be more divine? That each thing only experiences that which it is fated to itself. At the same time, it has at all times at hand a means of salvation from those errors that may have been made. The infinite mercy of God is that through prayer, through divine intervention, the opportunity to transcend exists always. At the depths of the pits of hell, beyond all human imagination, but intuited and written about by Dante, in the pits of the foreverness of hell, which goes on through timeless eons, a black despair of agony of the soul which cannot be described. In the incredible pits of hell, the voice said, "If there is a God, I ask him to help me." And then came forth oblivion. And then the disappearance of any person and only the presence of the infinite essence of all that is, radiating forth as all existence, as the source and essence of all of life, beyond all time, beyond all description, beyond all limitation, beyond all entreaty. So, it would seem that salvation as such then is available even at great depths. So we'll go on to some other questions. I just want to say one thing about spiritual practice so I don't forget it. I'll say, why didn't I say something about spiritual practice? That spiritual practice is something you do as often and as frequently as possible And the one that I recommend is not dissimilar from that recommended by Ramana Maharshi, in that there is a constant letting go-ness and a constant looking within. It's a matter of focusing. Instead of focusing without, you focus within. What is deciding that? What is experiencing that? If there's a self-evaluation going, where is the self-evaluation coming from? In other words, you're trying to get to the very core of consciousness itself. And as one does that, it transforms everything. It's like suddenly the black and white world is turned on to Technicolor and 3D. You see it as you've never realized it before. The essence of divinity shines forth as all of existence. And it paralyzes you for quite a long time. So we'll get back to these questions. So you see, spiritual truth doesn't come out of historical cause and effectness. That's the downside of religion. It's back there and it's there. The upside of religion is that it embodies the acknowledgement of holiness and sacredness, the respect for that which is sacred. The one thing religion does get is the divinity of God and the sacredness of that divinity. The great cathedrals of the world, which, right now we're calibrating 1,000 things. And she's calibrating 1,000 things. I'm asking 1,000 questions. Anyway, when you calibrate the great cathedrals of the world, they're high, 700s. 700 is very, very unlikely as an occurrence in this planet. Few are the beings who ever even reach 700. But the great cathedrals, Chartres, the great cathedrals are stunning. When you walk into them, you're enveloped in this aura of sacredness, worship, devotion, and the energy of that prevails. It's hard to be smart-ass in Chartres Cathedral. Yeah. It's hard in... I spoke one time at Westminster Abbey, yes. And you walk through Westminster Abbey, the great beings that have ever walked the planet, there's their tomb, there they lay there. As you walk across the floor, there's a plate there and tells you who's under there. You think, my God, I shouldn't be stepping on that. Here's Shakespeare and here's Napoleon, all these great beings, Oh, Lord. All right, so the great cathedrals. So the value of religion is it recognizes the sacredness of beauty, the sacredness and the divinity of beauty. So beauty is one of the fastest ways to the sense of the presence of God. That music that we just played is 700, and it's almost impossible to function on that level. In these lectures, I'm training myself to do that. It's hard to speak when you're weeping because the beauty just wipes you out. The sacredness of divinity then is acknowledged through the self-sacrifice of the thousands and thousands of workmen. Some of those cathedrals took over 1,000 years, and they're still working on them. An entire lifetime is devoted to carving this one pulpit. It's in 3 dimensions. There's figures here, and then figures behind those figures, then figures behind them, all done in hard wood. One entire lifetime just to carve this one. Gift to God. It's a gift. To sense the devotion of those whose devotion was so extreme. brings the energy of their devotion into your own inner experience, and you get what it is. You get what it is. The worship and the recognition and the acknowledgement of the sacredness of that which is divine. That's a road which anyone can take. The appreciation for beauty. A great aria in an opera can just wipe you out, you know. We're going to see Hansel and Gretel. The children's chorus from Hansel and Gretel wipes you out. La Boheme. There's an aria where he realizes that Mimi has just died, and he screams, Mimi. You break out crying every time you hear it. I've seen that opera 10 or 12, 15 times. Every time. The same. The intensity of the love. We experience the presence of God through love, through beauty, through that which is sacred. So we are worshipful when we respect the sacredness of all of life. We worship God when we turn the black beetle over from his back onto his tummy so he can walk away instead of leaving him there with his legs wobbling in the air. Out of that act, we worship God because we say, God, life, so long as it exists in this form, is sacred. And you realize the sacredness. So it's an act of worship. All that we do that supports life is a recognition of a respect for the sacredness of life. And that's really all that's required. Is it possible to transform the physical body into a spiritual body? Well, it means as Jesus did. My experience and understanding is as one goes out of body, one's in the etheric body and the spiritual body. My guess would be that with the opening of the third eye, the disciples were able to witness. Usually when somebody goes out of physicality into the etheric realm, you can't see them anymore. My guess would be that with the opening of the third spiritual eye, they witnessed the spirit body of the Lord. We have permission to ask that. The disciples did have the opening of the third eye and witnessed the etheric body. Yeah. So they merely saw the spirit leaving the physicality. It isn't that the physical body is transformed into a spiritual body. It's that the spiritual body which inhabits the physical body during its physical life leaves it. So it isn't like this physicality is transformed into the spirituality. It just leaves it, is my understanding. Can kinesiology be used for future-related questions? No. It can't be used for the hypothetical, and it can't be used for the future. The reason is they're not real. The problem with the hypothetical question is that no answer is really possible because it doesn't exist in reality. What if mankind had 4 eyes? Then what would happen to them? I mean, there's no answer to that because the hypothetical it has no existence in reality. It's just a nonsense question. A lot of politics is that. In which one quality is extracted, and then that's supposed to be the most important thing about your human being, I got news for them. Those people who talk from such ivory towers should travel the slums of the world. You see how much highfalutin political ideology appeals to the people. They're eating grubs to stay alive. And you want them to die for the vote? Vote for what? They're so far from that as a reality. To really exist from day to day is, rags tied together over branches and 4 families living there taking turns sleeping on the dirt floor while they go about and eat actually grubs and worms. And unbelievable. Covered with scabs and the bones all stick out. And by age 5 or 6, they're dead already. Old age almost. In some parts of the world, I remember the people are all very small. There isn't much oxygen there anyway, so it's a good thing they're small. And the only way you can survive there is chewing coca leaf, because you can only work all day long with nothing to eat. With coca leaf, it eliminates your hunger. If you had nothing to eat, you'd be stupid not to chew coca leaf, wouldn't you? Of course. So this way you can at least survive. And this little old lady walked by, this little old lady with the ear pads hanging down like this and all. And they all pad about very quietly like this. They're descendants of the Incas. They live up in the mountains in Peru. The government wants to get them down from there, but they don't want to come down because they're smart. Anyway. Join the big cities and the civilization. This little old crone walks across there. And I said to somebody, how old is she? She's 38. 38, you're an old crone. By 40, you're dead of old age. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just one vitamin tablet would probably increase their lifespan by 10 years. Tuberculosis is eating them up. They don't eat because of the coca leaf. And if they do have some money, they spend it on beer. And there's a red feather hanging out of a shop where you can buy beer. It's just a different lifestyle. And all what we consider important to them is so irrelevant, they don't even know what you're talking about. You should all vote. Vote for what? They're trying to get through till noon, you know what I mean? Our political system means absolutely nothing to them. So the downside of politics is we're not aware of the consciousness level of the people we're talking to. See, the egocentricity, we're so enamored of our own scheme of things. Oh, we're so superior. Superior to what? Well, when you're talking to people, you have to be aware of their level of consciousness so that you can speak meaningfully to them. So a lot of the diplomatic catastrophes of history are because of the presumption that other people are like us. I'll tell you, folks, they are not like us. They did not go to an Ivy League college. They did not play Marquis of Queensberry rules. They're street people. And the minute you sign a peace treaty with them, you idiot, you turn around and they cut your throat. That's the reason they got you to sign the peace treaty. Because as you leave the table, they got you. Sucker. So those are the realities of the world. So, it has to do with the sheep and the wolf in sheep's clothing. The vulnerability of the spiritual seeker is that of naivete, especially in the beginning years where you're enamored of the sudden discovery of the whole spiritual dimension. And it's intriguing and it's exciting. And in that space, one can go into denial about the realities of this world and become a sitting duck. And that's why I always counsel these classes. Don't be a plump little chicken. Because they are out to get you. Yeah. What is grace? What is the function of grace? Well, we said that the infinite totality of all of creation then radiates these energy fields to get us out of good and bad and see things as gradations. I made up this chart, you see? You could say up here is preferable and this is less preferable. You could do that. People say, well, the calibration of levels of consciousness could be used judgmentally. Well, that's true. It better be. Is one thing better than another? It isn't that it's better than another. From what viewpoint? When it's cold, heat is preferable to chilly. When it's hot, chilly is preferable to hot. So from what you choose then, everything gets rated. people say, well, that's not fair that things are judged one thing better than another. I'll tell you a fact about this world. Everything is better than something else. And everything is worse than something else. Because that's all in your head. So those who object to rating people as good or bad or whatever, politically speaking, etc., are playing a game of pretense, of naivete. Again, the wolf is hidden in the sheep's clothing, because that's denial of spiritual reality. Some things are, frankly, a hell of a lot better than other things. Not from an abstract viewpoint, no. From the abstract viewpoint, you could say that all that exists is equal by virtue of its existence. But you don't see that until you reach calibration level, the top of the deck, until you reach a great... In the state of oneness, in the state of the allness of creation, you see that all things are equal. But they are equal in a different meaning of the term equal than what is used in common language. It doesn't mean they are of different value. It means each thing is perfectly that which it is. And beauty prevails throughout. A stick is equal to a diamond. It's of no difference. You see, as you walk through the woods, this weed that stands there. Once you see what it is, its architecture, its design is incredible. It stands there in absolute perfection. Now you don't call it weed anymore. You see it as an incredible sculpture. The incredible sculpture of all that exists is equal to everything else that exists. And I remember walking down the streets of New York into the alley and struck by the incredible beauty of the alley. All the garbage cans and everything. It was like French impressionistic painting almost. There was the garbage can all dented over like that, and the garbage hung out the side, and the little mouse ran across, and there was the banana peel. So, there is a level in which you see the beauty and perfection of all that exists. When that begins to happen, you tell your friends that you're going into retreat. You're not safe on the streets, you can get arrested. Grace then is the presence, the potentiality, the presence of a very high energy frequency and vibration, which, through good fortune, one picks up in one's own aura as an intentionality, by agreement, by design, by subscription. You'd go to see the Karmapa because the Karmapa transmits a blessing. Whether he does or doesn't is irrelevant, because your intention was to reach God through every available avenue. And even if the Karmapa wasn't there, he is now by virtue of your intention. Grace, in a way, is the opportunity to surrender to that which is intrinsic to salvation and enlightenment. It's walking down the street and suddenly you get that all you had to do was start smiling at people and you've just transformed the world. Anybody can do that walking down the streets of New York City or Chicago. You just start smiling at everybody and instantly everything happens. It changes. Goes from this world to this world. All you did is smile at everybody. Everybody goes, wow. So it's the transformative opportunity of a spiritual energy which energizes options that would perhaps not come to mind at the time. In the last lecture, we will talk about there's an important point in the evolution of consciousness where that grace is crucial. At that 1/10,000th of a second, that presence is crucial. Can you briefly describe the physical sensations of the nervous system that you may feel as one progresses in the spiritual path? Well, they can be all kinds of ailments, and weird and strange physical sensations. As one gets really quite advanced, I think it's because the nervous system is being taxed by this spiritual energy. There is a period of time, I think it's probably in the high 500s, let me ask. What I'm thinking about now is in the high 500s resist. It was coming on after 600 resist. It was coming on after 700 resist. It starts at 500. It starts at 540. It starts at 550. It starts at 580 resist. It starts at 575 resist. 570, 565. Okay, at energy level around 565, which would be like saintliness. Course in Miracles calibrates at 600. If you do it assiduously, you get transported into that level. And what is traditionally called the Kundalini energy, a spiritual energy, begins to flow of its own. It may be, I think it's also facilitated by meditation. Let's see if it is so. The flow of the Kundalini is also facilitated by meditation resist. Okay. Through devotion, worship, through spiritual intention, and by meditation, this incredible energy begins to flow up your back. It's unbelievable. It's exquisite. Better than an orgasm. It's just beyond imagination. It flows as exquisite, joyful pleasure up the back, and you feel it flowing into the brain. In fact, you can direct where the energy goes by just sort of focusing your attention to the left side of the brain. It seems to flow over there. Focus on the right side of the brain. It flows up your back and into the brain.